Back again for another one. Just want to share some things that I've observed in the Bible that kind of hit me. It's interesting how patterns in the Bible go right along with what happens in our day. And one of them is how God calls people to be leaders and influencers, and he might put them into power for a little bit, but then he takes them out and he has them refined. So some of the people that you can think of would be Joseph, the youngest brother of his 12 brothers, Jacob's son, and how he was the favored son. The brothers were jealous. They ended up selling him to a caravan after they actually tried to dump him in a well to have him die. But he ended up becoming a slave, and because of his abilities, he was put in charge of Potiphar's household. Potiphar was head of the prison, and so he was in a very good position. But Potiphar's wife was the type that fools around, and she kept trying to get him in bed. So as Joseph, being a godly man, would not do that and loyal to his master, Potiphar, he ended up being falsely accused by Potiphar's wife, who, once she realized she couldn't get him in bed, she claimed that he tried to rape her. So he ended up in prison for quite a while, and then read the story yourself. He comes out of prison, and through a series of events, becomes second in command to only Pharaoh. That's one. Moses, God called him to lead the Israelites out from under that slavery from the Egyptians and Pharaoh, and he kills an Egyptian that was beating a fellow Israelite, which actually Moses was growing up in the household of Pharaoh, because he was the little baby that Pharaoh's daughter found floating in the river, because Moses' mother didn't want to kill him, which was Pharaoh's edict for all Hebrew boys to be killed when they're born. Kind of like abortion today, except Margaret Sanger actually started that to get rid of the black race. So for those of you who are really interested in the true history of that, I throw little things into my podcast that might make somebody dig a little deeper. But anyway, you got Moses, who ran away, knew he was going to be killed by Pharaoh, but he ends up coming back strengthened, and roll up the window here. So then you've got David, King David. He becomes king. Well, first he's called to be king, but then King Saul gets really jealous, and he's trying to kill David. Sort of like a reminiscent of King Herod, who, even though Jesus was born close by, he was afraid Jesus, because he was born the King of the Jews, he was afraid of his power being taken away. So he had all the babies under 2 years old killed in Bethlehem, and that was according to prophecy. So the patterns are many times when God calls somebody into a position of leadership, they might go into that position of leadership, and through whatever types of events, they're taken out of that leadership for a time to refine them, mostly to cause them to get close to God, dependent on God, and knowing God and his ways. So right now we're seeing that with Trump. Now, not that long ago, during this regime's reign of lots of crimes. They were forcing military people, even though they might have had their own reasons, religious or otherwise, not to get the jab. They were kicking out people in the military for refusing to take the jab. So I'm reading a while back, a few months ago, I'm reading this story in 1 Chronicles chapter 12, and it's after Saul, who was trying to kill him, ended up getting slaughtered with his whole army on Mount Gilboa. So the clan of Saul, typically in that kind of culture, would be looking for who's going to replace our clan's king, which was Saul. But interestingly, it says in 1 Chronicles 12, these were the men who came to David at Ziklag while he was banished from the presence of Saul, son of Kish. They were among the warriors who helped him in battle. They were armed with bows and were able to shoot arrows or to sling stones, right-handed or left-handed. They were kinsmen of Saul from the tribe of Benjamin. So then it lists them, who they are, how many men they had, all their leaders of hundreds and leaders of thousands and that kind of thing. And it starts describing these guys who are coming over to David. Some Gadites defected over to, by the way, Gadites are from the tribe of Gad, G-A-D. Some Gadites defected to David at his stronghold in the desert. Trump also has a stronghold in, if you want to call it that, Mar-a-Lago. They were brave warriors, ready for battle and able to handle the shield and spear. Their faces were the faces of lions, and they were as swift as gazelles in the mountains. These guys were true warriors. And when you think, oh, nobody's as swift as a gazelle, yeah, you got to remember, they didn't eat the garbage we eat. They had actual clean water, clean air, and living on what God gave them to live on back then, without all the GMOs and chemicals and pesticides that we get stuck into us. Azer was the chief, Obadiah the second in command, Eliab the third. Goes into who they were. These Gadites were army commanders. The least was a match for 100, and the greatest for 1,000. These guys were real warriors, man. David was too. David was the one that killed Goliath with the sling when he was still a boy, young man, and much, much smaller than Goliath. And so then it starts talking about all these tribes going over to David. Very interesting. These are the military leaders. These are the soldiers going over to David. They're defecting. And it lists them all. And it lists them by tribes and what they used for battle. And they go through all the tribes, how many guys they had. You know, this tribe, 6,800 men. This one, 7,100 under this guy, 40. It goes on, and some of them are much larger numbers, 20,800 warriors, 18,000, 50,000, 28,000, 40,000, 120,000. And it's interesting, some of them, the men of Zebulun, experienced soldiers prepared for battle with every type of weapon to help David with undivided loyalty. Brave warriors, famous in their own clans. Men of Benjamin, Saul's kinsmen, 3,000, most of whom had remained loyal to Saul's house until then. These guys could have said, hey, we got to get a guy from our own clan to become king. But they said, no, we're going to make David king. And they knew from David's exploits as one of Saul's officers, whenever he would go out with his men, he would do exceedingly greater than any of the other officers. And that's where Saul became very jealous, and he realized if he didn't kill his thinking, because he was motivated by the devil, he thought, well, if I don't get rid of David, my son Jonathan is not going to succeed me, and David will become king. So anyway, even Jonathan became a good friend of David, and he knew that God had called David to be on the throne. And Jonathan said, I know God's called you. Just, I will be loyal to you. Just, I will sit on your right hand when you become king. But he was also killed in the battle on Mount Gilboa when the Philistines killed them. Now, that's just one thing that I wanted to mention. Well, there is another thing. All these fighting men who volunteered to serve in the ranks, they came to Hebron fully determined to make David king. Other parts say they were totally loyal to him. They gave him a great and mighty army. Now, don't you think that the real military, our patriot, God-loving, country-loving soldiers, airmen, whatever, don't you think that when they saw what this regime was doing, don't you think that they tried to, the leaders, let's say mostly, and really I know of others that are in the ranks that did contact Trump and say, hey, we really need to be under you, we're going to be behind you, besides the other generals that were already behind him. So that's just something that when I was reading this, I was realizing it was like being impressed on me that this is what's happening right now at the time I was reading this. But don't just let it go. Pray that these things go through. Mike, hey, how you doing, man? Yeah, why watch the doggone election, right? What's up with the election? Big deal. I mean, all it is news media blowing their hot air out. We already know what's going to happen. They're going to try to steal it. Trump's going to still take the presidency. It's been clearly prophesied by Kim Clement of, I stick him up there at the top. His prophecies were absolutely amazing. For those of you who don't know, he was prophesying all the way back from 2004, 6, 10. He didn't know he was talking about Donald Trump, but his prophecies were absolutely amazing. So the prophetic words from God's prophets, people that God gives an anointing on it, a gift. People think that prophets aren't for today. Well, you look in the Bible, it says God has given evangelists, prophets, teachers, whatever, them all. I can't think of it right now. It's like, okay, which one did you decide to take out of that list? Are you saying, oh, well, we don't have prophets today? What if somebody else says, well, we don't have evangelists? What if somebody else says, we don't have teachers today? All right, who are you to say, right? So, yeah, I do believe in modern day prophets, but you do got to, listen to them and examine what they say. Kim Clement was definitely a legitimate prophet. Mark Taylor had some good prophecies as well. He's still alive. So the other thing about the patterns of God, like I said, you've got God putting someone aside. And as a matter of fact, Kim Clement had mentioned that. Look up his prophecies, how God was going to set him aside for a while. And but he would be a president with 2 terms. And besides the fact, like I mentioned in the other video that I did earlier today, these knuckleheads are so blatant with their voter fraud right now, and the Pentagon did not send out the absentee ballots to the troops in numerous different bases. So these active duty soldiers, airmen, servicemen did not get the opportunity to vote. Obviously, another thing done on purpose. Don't think that was an accident, because you know why they didn't send them to the military. So then you've got the illegal act and coup of replacing Biden, who was voted in to run on the Democratic Communist Progressive ticket. But they inserted the one with the least amount of votes when she was trying to run for president, Kamala. Now, camel dung is only used for one good thing, and that's burning. Like they use camel dung to burn and heat their fire up so they can cook their food over there in the desert. Now, I don't know if you know that, but that's what camel dung can be used for. Now, you've got camel dung, and you got this Papa Echo Delta Oscar guy named Waltz, who, when he was governor, wanted to remove the name Papa Echo Delta Oscar from... Yeah, hold on a second. What's up?
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Can I give you my business card? Everything about the truck. If you need something, let me know, okay?
Okay, buddy. Take care. Have a good day.
You too.
All right. Yeah, so he tried to remove that Papa Echo Delta Oscar word from the something to do with a law, and of course, him being one, I can understand why he would want to remove it. He's also got a whistleblower victim that was on his team that claimed he was sexually abused from age 14 on, as the coach was, as Walz was coach. Also, if you look it up, he was removed from being coach along with his wife, who you're not supposed to have them be together like that, but they were. They were removed from that position because of the complaints that were coming regarding that kind of activity. So I know there was something else I was going to say about the patterns of God. Yeah. Okay, this is a big one for me. This is not as much of a pattern as I believe Trump has got the calling, anointing, mantle, whatever you want to call it, of several people in the Bible. Number one, I believe he's got the calling of Nehemiah, who built the wall, rebuilt the wall. He's got that calling on his life. Number two, according to Trey Smith and his great videos, especially the one that initially was called Trump, God's Choice for America, ? Now called, retitled Landslide, I think it is, something about landslide. And he shows that coin that came out of Israel with Trump's profile up, and behind him was Cyrus's profile, because they believe that Trump will be a Cyrus to Israel. So you got Nehemiah for rebuilding the wall. You got the calling of Cyrus, which Cyrus was not a Jew, a Hebrew, or an Israelite, but it's a position of power and assignment of something that God used him to do. Cyrus, King Cyrus, helped, aided the Hebrews, the Jews, in rebuilding the temple that was destroyed. So the other calling is Jehu. He's got the calling of Jehu, which I think is kind of interesting, because Jehu's assignment from God was to take down the house of Jezebel and Ahab for all the blood, innocent blood, that she had, and he, of course. He was the weak man, Ahab, very much like Bill Clinton and Hillary. So the calling of Jehu, he fulfilled. He was anointed to be king by a guy that Samuel sent, I believe it was. In any case, the interesting part to me that correlates to Trump is Trump is a warrior in a sense, like he never was in the military, but he is a fearless warrior. Hey, anybody that's gone through as much as he has and withstood it, the attacks on him, his businesses, his family, his life, all of that, it shows God is protecting him. Another thing, let me see who's commenting here, see if it's something I gotta. Okay, Gary, you're ridiculous. Thank you. Hey, so you got the calling of Jehu. Now, the interesting thing about Jehu was when he was racing towards the fortress, they sent out riders to him to find out who it was. They didn't know who it was, who's coming against us here. And they sent out a rider, and each rider they sent out, they would say, "Do you come in peace?" And Jehu would say, "What do you have to do with peace? Fall in behind me." Next one, same thing. He fell in behind him. So finally, Ahab goes racing out, and before he goes racing out, somebody said to him, the driving of he drives like Jehu. He drives his chariot like a madman. I had a brother that was like that. He drove like a madman, and it's interesting that Jehu came. He took out Jezebel, and that's an interesting story, man. When he came to that palace and she put on all that makeup and looked down and said some things to him, I'm not going to quote it because I don't have any verbatim, but it was about you murderer of your king, whatever, Ahab. But in any case, he looked up. There were eunuchs standing up there, and he said, "Who of you is with me?" And 2 of them or 3 of them looked down at him like, "Yeah, we're with you." And he said, "Throw her down." They threw her down, and she splattered all over the sidewalk. And just like the prophecies had said about her, the only thing that would be left, the dogs would be eating up her body, and only thing left was her skull and her hands, I guess. Horses trampled it and everything. So Trump is going to take down the Jezebel and Ahab, and believe me, they are guilty of some very, very wicked stuff, which we really can't talk about much on here, but let's just say has to do with children, has to do with underground tunnels, has to do with cages, has to do with things you don't want to talk about that they do to children. Those children end up eliminated. They drink the red stuff from the children that they think gives them extra long life, and it does give them a high because the adrenaline from that child, for what they've been through, by the time they take it out, gives them a high. And actually, when Trump was in, he made the sale and consumption of it illegal. And all these things are going to come back when he comes back in. They're going to be enacted. So be prepared for some wild rides, and for certain people to be taking a ride to places like Gitmo. That's going to be very interesting. So that's about all I got to say right now. I got other things I want to talk about later, but I'll make a different video for that. So that's it. And Gary, you'll be eating your words, but hope you straighten yourself out.